I'll tell you what I've really spent, especially the last 4 or 5 years, doing is connecting mind, soul, gut, whatever you want to call it, right? Putting it all together, learning to listen to my gut, my intuition, my higher self, whatever you want to call it, because in my experience, that part of me is almost never wrong.
Tucker,
Yes.
Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Been a fan of your work since I was probably 7th grade, 8th grade.
Yeah.
And it's been cool to see you evolve and change over the years, just from a distance. And then when I looked at and did a deep dive, I was like, oh, wow, this is exciting for me, because I've been also on a similar journey of transformation from the surface level to the more internal stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a lot of fun here today. So
That's great, because you're 27, you said?
yes, sir.
I started my journey when I was 27. Really, like what I consider starting was 27. So if you've already come a long way at 27, you're way ahead of where I am.
So when you say you started your journey at 27,
So I went to law school at Duke, and then I got fired from my first legal job at like 25 or 26, in a pretty famous way in the legal profession. That's actually in my first book, that story. And then went to work for my dad, and then he fired me from the family business. Like my own dad fired me from the family business. And that story I think is in my second book, or at least a part of that story. And so it was like, I was like 26, 27 at the time. I think it was actually 26. And like been fired from the two things I kind of like studied for and thought I would do. And it was like, I had no idea what the hell to do or who I was or whatever. And I was kind of bumming around on French couches for a while. And a friend of mine, like in Chicago, invited me up. It's like, oh yeah, I had to go to weddings. Like, come, stay at my place, whatever. And I just ended up never leaving. And then I started writing. It was actually 3 weeks, I think, before my 27th birthday. I started writing, and the reason is because like I had been sending emails to my friends in law school, during law school and after we left, and they're all pretty funny. But I thought everyone writes emails like this that are funny, right? Because all my friends, actually, not all of them, but most of them are really funny. And like, I think I have a couple emails in some of my books that my friends wrote that are like at least as funny as anything I've ever written. And so I'm like, everyone has friends that's funny, and everyone does this. There's nothing remarkable about this. And one of my friends actually, in that circle, was like, dude, you should be a writer. And I'm like, what kind of bitch ass shit is this? Like, I'm not gonna be a writer. And he's like, well, you failed at law and you failed at business, so like this is the only thing you're actually good at. And so long story short, I ended up, sending all my stuff to publishers, 100% rejection, put it on the internet. And this is like back when, you had to be on GeoCities, or you had to program your own HTML, before MySpace even existed. And so, it ended up blowing up pretty quickly. 'Cause I was one of the first big writers to do anything, funny for free that was only on the internet. And then it kind of took off, and then it ended up getting a book deal, and that became I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell. And which were essentially that book is, at least half of it is just emails I wrote to my friends in law school, about funny stuff I was doing. And then that spent 5 or 6 years on the New York Times bestseller list and sold, 1.5 million, 2 million copies, just by itself. And then the series I've sold, 4 or 5 million. Right. And that all, but that started at 27. Like I started writing 3 weeks before my 27th birthday. Yeah.
Crazy.
And bro, I was like, that's really not even, you talk about starting your growth and development journey. I guess that kind of was, because I was like, entrepreneurial and doing my thing and creating my art, but I didn't look at it that way. I was still very, I was still in survival mode. It was like, I got literally fired from being a lawyer in a very public way. And I got fired by my dad from the family business. Like, I had nowhere else to go. So it was like, if people will pay me to write stories about drinking, I guess I'm just going to have to do that.
Why did you even want to be a lawyer in the first place?
That's a stupid decision. So like you have to, you're 27, so it might be hard for you to understand this in a good way. Cause everyone thinks, oh, the world's so much worse than it used to be. No, in some ways it's better. And one of the ways it's better is that when I was like, let's say, 19, 20, 21, that age range. So 25-ish years ago, everybody went to college. Going to college was still very prestigious. Like the idea, like only kind of losers don't go to college, or weird like freak shows, now it's like everyone's smart. It's like, why would I waste time in college? It's stupid. But no one got that then. And so I went to a top 10 undergrad, a top 10 law school. I got an academic scholarship to a top 10 law school. So like in the academic conventional corporate sense, I was a badass baller, like in terms of my educational credentials. Like a lot of people now who are entrepreneurs like are insecure because they didn't go to college or they went to a crappy school. And I'm friends with tons of those people. And it's so funny because they're like, they have so much respect for me because I did so well in academia. And I'm like, guys, it's a scam. That whole field is a scam. I just figured out the scam when I was 13 and you didn't. Like, that's the only difference. And I'll explain it to him and like, oh yeah, you're totally right. Why was I insecure about it? I'm like, because you bought the lie that doing good in school means you're smart and not doing good in school means you're dumb. And that's like, you probably like, smart kids your age laugh at that. Like the idea that like, no, this is school. This is stupid. This is a fraud. You guys all get this. People my age, still a lot of them don't. Really, seriously. Like people in the 45 to 55 plus range and definitely older. Like they're, oh, you went to Duke. You must be smart. I'm like, that's not, I know idiots that went to law school with me. Like that doesn't make me smart. But like, it means I gamed the system well. That's all it means. Anyway, so, but I bought it at, when I was 19, 20, I bought into that lie. And so going, in undergrad, when you go to a really good undergrad, generally speaking, there's kind of three main career paths. Either it's investment banking, management consulting, or lawyer, right? You can do doctor, there's that, right? And there's a few things like that. But in terms of if you want to make money, if you want to be like a master of the universe baller, I'm talking about 25 years ago, that was the mindset. And so, when I was a freshman, I had a couple of friends that were upperclassmen. And then when I got to be sophomore, junior, and it was time to do interviews, I interviewed with Goldman Sachs, man. I interviewed with JP Morgan, all those in undergrad. Like I went to the level of undergrad where the iBanks come to your school to interview, right? And so I did all those interviews. I got offers from a lot of them. But I saw my upper class friends who now worked at those places, like the iBank friends, bro, they worked, I'm not joking, 16 hours a day. Like that was their whole life. They would work on like their slow days. They'd work 13 hours. And then at like 10 o'clock, they'd go to a club and do coke and then bang some hooker and then come and then go like from the club to their offices at 4 a.m. and start working again on spreadsheets. And I'm like, that's hell. Like I'm not doing that. What the hell? Like I'm not doing that. And granted, they all had money, but it's like, there's no, this is horrible. But I remember at the time, like people were like, thought I was crazy that I would turn down an offer from JP Morgan, right? Or Goldman Sachs. And I'm like, no, like this is horrible. And then, and the kind of, I want to say cool in quotes, but like the fun kind of cool dudes and the party girls that were smart tended to go to the iBanks. And then for the management consultants, those were kind of like the nerdy do-gooder, which is a lot of all top academics, but it's not everyone there. There's a lot of cool people who are like legit. And so a lot of them went to the management consulting companies, like McKinsey interviewed me. And I'm pretty sure McKinsey gave me an offer. I definitely got an offer from like, I don't know, PwC or I can't remember all these banks, management consultants. But they were such busybody nerds, like in the worst way. I don't mean nerd like someone really smart and like, like scientists can be a nerd, but they're cool as hell, like Richard Feynman or something. I mean like like Pete Buttigieg or whatever his name is, right? Like that dude. That dude literally worked at McKinsey. He is if you want to understand what management consultants are, that dude is like, that's the guy, right? And so I'm like, no, I'm not gonna go hang out with those people. They suck, right? And so I thought really seriously about a military career, which is probably a really good thing I didn't go in the military, because I'm pretty sure that would have been right at the beginning of the global war on terror, and I would have got myself killed. Like I don't think I would have been good. I like violence. I like I do MMA. I just shooting, but doing it in the military is a different thing. Right. And so like I have all the respect in the world for those guys and the people who did that. But I think I would have sucked at doing that in the military. Definitely. And so I ended up not doing that. But the only reason I didn't do it is because my girlfriend at the time, my dad talked me out of it, which I regretted for a long time. Now I'm like, fuck, I'm glad I listened to him. So then the only option left really was law school. Right. And like, I didn't really know that many lawyers. The few I knew were friends of my dad's, and they were actually kind of cool. And I didn't really think about this at the time, but they were all plaintiffs' attorneys, which is why they were all rich. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just be a rich attorney. Like they weren't corporate, right? And so it's like, yeah, they were a little bit sleazy, but everyone in Florida is sleazy. So it's like, okay. And dude, and so then like I didn't really understand. And plus it's 3 more years of school, and I was really good at school. Like the game of school, I mastered it, right? And so I ended up I got an academic scholarship to Duke. You know, I got into Harvard and UVA and some other places, but Duke's like, we'll give you money to go. And then like Duke was like the 8th ranked law school at the time, and I'm like, hold on, I got to pay $50,000 a year to go to UVA, but you'll give me $30,000 a year to go. You'll pay my stuff and then give me money to go. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, of course. What kind of like, this is amazing. Because white dudes don't get like academic scholarships, right? Even then, even 25 years ago, like that was pretty rare. But Duke was like making a concerted effort to really pump up their numbers and higher ranking law school. And I had great academics and great LSAT and all that. And so they gave me money. It was funny. I thought it was special when I got there, and like half my class got a ton of money. Like half my class were kids who got into Harvard or Yale or Chicago or Stanford, but Duke gave them money to come there. I was like, oh, they just gave money to everybody in the class. But I always talk about that, and people are like, oh, you must be so smart. I'm like, yeah, I am, but there's a little bit more to the story. Anyway, so I got there, and then like law school. First off, law school is really boring to me because I went to the University of Chicago, which is like really a top 2 or 3 undergrad in terms of academics. I had done, like, everyone who gets to law school, what people say is hard about it is it kind of teaches you a new way to think, right? And honestly, all it does is teach you basic logic and basic analytics and basic rigorous thinking. It's not that complicated. And I had done all of that in undergrad, right? Because I had taken the law, I forget what the law, letters, and societies, what they call the major at University of Chicago, but it's basically pre-law, but it's run by law school professors. So like I took a lot of my classes in law school, like with law students and as an undergrad. And so like I'd already been through all that stuff. So I got to undergrad and it was like, well, I've already done this. This is easy. I got to law school. And so, whereas a lot of my friends were like from state schools, like Pitt or Kansas or whatever, and they're smart dudes, but they were like underwater, right? Because like if you go to like Kansas, that's an idiot state school. Like, listen, Kansas is great for a state school, but let's be honest, like you're not doing real complicated work there, right? And so like they're all smart dudes and they end up doing fine. But for like the first semester or two, like they're like, oh my God, this is so difficult. I'm like, bro, this is easy. And so I just stopped going to class, like because it was boring as hell. And then law school was a party for me, man. It was like, because we lived 15 minutes from Chapel Hill, like UNC, which was like at the time 65% girls. So it was like all these really hot girls and these doofus Southern frat boys who thought they were cool, but it was just a 2-to-1 girl to guy ratio. So that's why they were doing well. And so it was like, bro, it was like being a wolf in a petting zoo, man. Because those dudes were all 19, 20, 21, and I show up and I'm 24 and I've got money and I go to a law school and it's like, it was easy. And it was awesome. I loved it. I had so much fun. And so it was amazing. But then I started like realizing like I like being a lawyer is a horrible job. like the worst. And law school is not really at all about being a lawyer. They don't really teach you anything about being a lawyer. You learn, it doesn't, but like I kind of spent some time. I interned a little bit in the summer between my first and second year, and then the second year I interned a lot. And it was like, I came to the realization that being a lawyer is essentially you're just a paper monkey for people who are rich or actually doing things. And I'm like, I'm not going to spend my life pushing paper for someone else doing shit. I'm going to do shit. This is bullshit. It is a soulless, that's at its best. At its worst, it's a horrible soulless job. I mean, you're literally sitting on the phone all day arguing minutia with some other nerd, and you're representing some soulless corporation. He's repping some other soulless corporation. And it's like you're talking about big money corporate law. That's all it is. And it's like, what the fuck am I wasting my life on? Arguing some nonsense with someone I don't like for a company I don't care about? The hell is this? And it's so funny when you talk to corporate lawyers, none of them actually talk about the work they do because they know it's horrible. So the way that they sell it is, oh, we do all this other stuff. We have a great pro bono program, and we this and we that. And it's like, because your actual work is horrible. Yeah. And you're pretending it's not.
Well, on that point, I often find that the professions where you have to dress the best are actually the professions that look and feel the worst inside. And the reason why the dress is the way it is because you have to have some prestige, quote unquote, yes, to sell the dream, yes, of what it is going to become. Is that also true from your?
I mean, 100%, dude. Everything about it's everything about. I don't mean this literally, but everything about corporate commercial law essentially is a fraud. Just about, right? Now, if you're talking about tort law, like plaintiffs litigation and stuff, that's a different field, like, if some manufacturing company dumps a bunch of poison in a river and a bunch of people die, then like often it's the plaintiff's attorney who gets justice there, right? So like, even though like they have a bad reputation and a lot of it's deserved, on the other hand, there's a lot of people like the Erin Brockovich types, although whether she's a little sketchy, but that type, who've done actually a lot of really great stuff, right, for the world. So like common law as it's intended to be run, and as it was in England for 1,000 years, works really well, right? Like as a way of finding justice between conflicting and aggrieved parties, but very little of modern legal world is that,
Yeah. Well, that's like one phase of your life, the law phase.
Right.
Take me through trying to get famous.
Oh, bro. Man, where do I even start? I don't know. It was once so I kind of told the story how I started writing. Once I got some attention from writing, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. People love me and think I'm amazing. And all I did was publish this email I wrote my friends. Like I was trying to make my friends laugh, which is more than enough for me. But like now these people I don't know think I'm awesome. And then girls started showing up, right? And I'm like, hold on, this girl doesn't know me. She's just showing up to fuck me because of what I wrote. Well, this is amazing. Because, dude, I'm telling you, bro, when you get famous, even a little bit famous, right? Everything changes for you as a guy. Because here's the thing. Like, when you're a woman, even if you're like a 5 or a 6, like a fairly mediocre looking woman, even a 3 or a 4 in certain situations, even slightly unattractive women have always been in situations in their life where they're the hottest girl in the room, right? And they get a ton of attention, and every dude wants to sleep with them, and the other girls are all kind of like angling or whatever. Like virtually every woman knows what it's like to be objectified, right? To have that sort of attention and that sort of aura around you. No dude does. I mean, there's some random guys who are like beautiful Adonises. Like I have a friend like that who walks into a room, he's a nobody, and he's so good looking that women just come up to him, and that's just never happened to me in my life. Like maybe some really ugly or really overweight girl sometimes will be like, she's like, oh, that guy's hot enough. he's good looking enough that maybe I can get him, right? That's like 10 times in my life that's happened. No woman has ever been attracted to me because of what I look like. I'm funny and smart and like I'm good enough looking that like I don't, I'm not ugly. I don't disqualify myself. But dudes are there's 3 categories of dudes. There's a small percentage of dudes who are really hideously ugly. And there's a even smaller percentage of dudes who are just gorgeous. And the rest of us, 80% are in the middle.
That's
right,
us.
Right. And it kind of doesn't matter, bro. If you could be on the ugly side of the middle or the attractive side of the middle, but if you're in the middle, then you're basically judged by what you do and who you are and how you show up, not what you look like, right? And so, either you're the elephant man or you're Brad Pitt or you're just a dude. No one cares, right? Yes. Okay. So, once you become famous as a guy, then you basically are like Brad Pitt or like a hot girl. And so women now want to have sex with you without knowing anything, without knowing you at all, right? But every woman understands what that's like. No dude understands, because I don't care how good your game is as a guy. You've got to go out and spit it. And bro, I had really good game when I started writing. Like I was good with, I was hooking up with, 1 or 2 girls a week. And this is long before online dating and like you had to go to bars and meet women, right? Like it was hard and I was good at that. And still like I had to work at it. And then I got famous and it's like women just showed up at my apartment and had sex with me. And these aren't hookers. Like these are like normal girls who were super into my stuff and wanted to hang out with me and drink with me and then have sex with me. And it was like cool. And I'm like, this is amazing. The metaphor I always use is imagine that like you're like a hunter-gatherer living in like a desert and you're barely scratching out an existence. You're alive, but you just have to work so hard every day to eat and get water and whatever. And then all of a sudden you move into a Vegas buffet and you live at the buffet. Like you're just going to gorge yourself all the time because it's free and there's just nothing but food there all the time, right? It was like that for me at first. When I got famous enough that women were coming to hook up with me, bro, I was like, I just went nuts, man. Because like I had always had to work I was 29, 30 when it kind of tipped. And I went from, like no one really knowing who I was to like girls showing up to hook up with me. And it was like, oh man, I remember it's like the effort I used to have to put in on a scale of 1 to 10, even if I was good at game, you're still putting in, let's say an 8, right? It went from an 8 to a 1. And so I was like, wait a minute, I can sleep with like 2 girls a day or 3. Like the only limit on the number of girls I can have sex with is essentially my physical stamina. Like, this is amazing. Like this. And so I did go a little fucking nuts for a while. Eventually it was just like, okay, like that's enough. Like, I kept hooking up with girls, but it was like, I got a little pickier and like for a while, I'm like, as long as she's not hideously ugly and she's on board, I'm on board too.
How did that whole thing stunt your emotional development?
Oh, dude. It was horrible for it. Because when you're famous as a dude, I'm going to put it so you go backwards. Honestly, I think I went backwards in a lot of ways. I'm going to tell you a story about a girl to help you understand why. So one time I was dating this girl who was really, really hot. Like, there's a lot of hot girls, but she was like kind of a different level of hot, like where like she has problems going out in public and stuff because she's so attractive. And so I was at a nice bar with her and some friends. This is in New York. This is like right about as I started writing. And so I wasn't famous yet. And so anyway, so like I didn't really like her that much, but she was so hot. And that's actually part of why she liked me so much. Like, cause I wasn't fawning over her and like, I'll buy you anything. I just didn't like her personality because she didn't really have a great person, but whatever. And I remember like, she invited a bunch of her friends and it was like this expensive New York place. And it was like, the bill came. I'll never forget this in my life. The bill came and it was, it was whatever it was. I mean, we probably had 1 or 2 rounds of drinks. And this is New York City. This is New York City 20 years ago. And the bill is like $350, right? Or something like that. And so I remember she looked at the bill and she's like, this is a travesty. This is horrible. This guy must have charged you for everything at the bar. And I'm like, No, there were 8 of us and we had 2 rounds of drinks. This is what it cost. And then I looked at her, I'm like, oh my God, you've never paid for a drink, have you? She goes, of course I've paid. I said, you have never paid for a drink in this city, have you? And she got all stuttery and like, bro, she had never paid a bar tab in her fucking life. She had no idea what things cost. Now, I tell you that story because like everyone thinks hot girls must have it so easy. And in certain ways, they really do. But the problem is that there's certain struggles or pieces of the world they never see. Like if you're a super hot girl, you never have to pay a bill in your entire life if you don't want to. And I'm not even talking about you go be a whore. You can just be, there is a way to be so attractive and organize your life that you really basically never pay for anything. As a famous dude, you don't have to do any emotional growth or relationships with women because there are plenty of women who will basically throw themselves at you and do anything you want. And so it's like you have no constraints or limits in your life, right? Because, bro, I can't tell you how many times I'd be out at something, event or whatever, and there'd be like 30 girls there that like wanted to hook up with me. And so like if I want a threesome and some girl's like, well, I just want it to be you and me. I'm like, okay, cool. You're not coming home with me tonight. And so it's not, I wouldn't make her. It's so funny when the whole Me Too movement came up, everyone's like, oh, they're going to come after you. I'm like, I guarantee you no one does because I was the opposite of Me Too. I had no power over any of these girls. I just fucked all the ones who wanted to fuck me with the constraints I was okay with. So it's like, if I wanted 3 that night, I've picked the 3 that were cool with having a foursome or whatever the fuck, right? Or whatever the thing. And so like, listen, that's fun and that's like cool. And like in a hedonistic way, it's awesome. But you don't have to grow or develop or face any constraint or anything about yourself. Because if some girl like wanted a relationship with me, even if I wanted a relationship with her, like a relationship means a lot. You grow together. You have to kind of face parts of yourself, self-awareness. There's all these things that like, if there's 30 girls standing outside my apartment waiting to take her place, why do I have to take any shit from her or deal with anything I don't want to around her, even if it's all my stuff? Because I can just blame her and go to the next girl, which I did for a decade.
Do you think that you have to go through that phase to renounce it?
No, I did.
Yeah.
I don't think every dude does. Yeah. I know guys who, a buddy of mine's a Mormon, and bless his heart, there's like a Mormon spring break thing or whatever, and he like went to a Mormon spring break thing and like, I don't know, he had a couple, like, I'm exaggerating because I don't know the whole story, but like one night he drank a bunch of alcohol-free beers and flirted with 3 girls, and that was his crazy phase. Like, wow. Dude, I mean, he was like got married in 20 or something, like he's like whatever, and like, but he in his mind and for him, that was his. He literally had like 3 nights in a row of that, and that was all he needed. And it was like, okay, cool. So, which is, I'm not judging that, or I'm saying like he's married with 6 kids now, he's super happy. So I'm not saying every dude has to do what I did, but we all have to go through, I think, the same overall phases, but how they look in each person can be radically different. And some people can essentially skip certain phases, like, I mean, shit, I know a ton of dudes in the military. I have a lot of friends who are either current or former military. A lot of those dudes needed to go to war, like actual war, and they need to kill people and they need to risk being killed. I didn't have to go through that, like, I go do MMA, which is like, none of us are dying in there. It's kind of close, right? It's not the same thing. I'm not like, that's an insult to dudes who've served to call it, well, I've been to war too. Someone punched me. Fuck it. Shut up. Right? That's nonsense. But like, that's more than enough for me to scratch that itch, right? That martial itch. Some guys had to get in it,
Is it the depth of the void that you were given equivalent to the amount that you were trying to fill with women or fame?
That's a good question. So, I had really, really crappy parents, right? And they were crappy in a very specific way. Like, no one beat me. My parents didn't beat me. My parents didn't sexually abuse me. My parents didn't, starve me. There was none of that horrific physical abuse, right? What there was, though, was an immense amount of neglect and emotional abandonment. Not literal physical abandonment, but although there was some of that, but I was never objectively unsafe, but I felt very abandoned and unsafe and neglected, right, as a kid. And so, so that creates a hole, right? All that trauma, all that trauma is what it is. It creates a hole, and there was no one around to help me deal with it at the time, obviously, because they were causing it, right? My parents, my primary caregivers were causing it. So like that hole has to be either I've got to turn and face my darkness, or I've got to do something to chase away those emotions, right? Those are the only, and I mean in the broadest sense. If you have emotional issues, either you face them or you avoid them, right? And so I was in no place, not either a mental state, not resource-wise, not friend-wise. I was in no state to face any of those. I didn't even realize I had them at that time, right? Really. But then at the same time, like, so what you avoid them, right? And you can, that's all drug addiction is avoiding, like you can go down any addiction is a coping mechanism for trauma. Right? Like there's a lot of people who've written about this and talked about this. One of the more famous ones right now is Gabor Mate. Everyone kind of knows who Gabor really nails this in a way that almost no one else had before him. Really explains it in a great way. But, what he says is addiction is not the problem. Addiction is the solution to the problem. He's right. What he's saying is that the addict has found the addiction to help them. It's useful for them to chase away the emotions they don't want to feel, they're not ready to feel, right? So, and bro, only every single successful entrepreneur I know has at least part of why they've been so driven to success is for this reason, right? So it's like addiction doesn't have to be like heroin. You can be addicted to money. You can be addicted to success. You could be addicted to the drama of building a business, the struggle of building a business, anything, media, attention, whatever it is you're trying to fill that hole with, right? And so I definitely used both the attention from writing, female and male, to try and fill that hole. And for a while it worked. It did. Like I can't pretend like it never worked. It worked. It worked for a long time. But it doesn't actually fill the hole because it's a bottomless hole. So you can't fill it. It's sort of like, like a jug with a hole in the bottom. You can put enough water. If you're putting the water in faster than it's leaking out, it's going to fill the jug for a while. Right. And so but the hole's still there. And then a lot of times what ends up happening is like, eventually you realize I don't know. I have no idea how many girls I slept with. It was a lot, but whether it was girl 100 or girl 1,000, at some point you're like, okay, well, this isn't it's not working anymore, right? The first whatever number were so much fun and so great, and I got this feeling from, and now it's not working.
What happened on November 27th, 2009?
I don't know. What day is that? No, I'm serious. I don't know.
It's the day that you found out that your movie wasn't.
No, September 27th.
Oh, I wrote it down wrong.
Yeah, September.
My apologies.
Super close. September 27th. I thought you knew some fact. I'm like, fuck, I don't know. That'd be like Thanksgiving of 2009. I'm trying to think of what that was. September 27th. That was when my movie came out. The movie about my first book. Yeah, and that was when I realized it wasn't going to do, 100 million at the box office. It was soul crushing, dude. It was totally soul crushing. I was in an A-loft in Tempe, Arizona. It's funny because since then I've driven by that A-loft and it's weird. I can't even tell you the room I was in. It was such an intense moment. I was in a hotel room in Tempe, Phoenix. And when I got that info, and I remember I actually thought I was crying so much and so upset. I was grieving so much. I thought I was going to die. Like really. Like I had no physical, I wasn't having a heart attack. I was in perfect health at the time, but it was like, it was one of the, it was the moment that broke I used my grandiosity, which is like a specific technical psychological term, my narcissism, my essentially, if you want to get really sort of metaphysical about it, it's the moment I realized that I wasn't my own God, like in a real sense, like that my worship of myself had led to this end. And like narcissism doesn't come from nowhere, man. Like it's an adaptive mechanism. It works really well when you're young and have a certain specific set of traumas coming through your life. It helps you deal with those, right? So it's not evil in that sense. The problem is if you don't ever deal with that or face that, right? And I hadn't. And so 2009, that I would have been 30. I think that was my 33rd or 34th birthday.
34.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
Jesus year.
Right, exactly. There you go. Right, my 34th birthday, and that was like the moment that like I knew it still took a long time for me to start therapy, etc. But that was the moment I had to decide, do I double down on what got me here? Because bro, I could have I know these dudes. I could have just started traveling the world and banging girls over the world, and I could have kept going down that path and writing books about it, and I had plenty of money, and I could have made more, and I could have just kept dumping women and alcohol and partying down that hole, right? Or do I turn and face my issues? Do I admit this isn't working? It's not going to get me there. I've got to go find, at the time, it was, I got to go find what does. Come to find out later, I've got to turn inwards, which is a whole sort of separate thing. But that was the moment.
Why did you face your issues?
Man, I wish I could give you like the answer, right? It's a great question. There isn't, I don't think, because I've had multiple moments like that. That's a big one, but I've definitely had a lot of moments. People in the movies, you always see that, like the hero has like one big moment or one big decision, and then it's like he makes that decision, or she, and there's a climax of the movie, and then it's like everything's great after that. And it's like, that's not how it works in life. The way it works in life is you don't just make that decision then. You have to then change your pattern of behavior, which is, if you make the big decision then, it's easier to change your pattern, but it doesn't just change by itself, right? It's a series of decisions. Right. And they've got to be mostly consistent. And so why did I just at that point, for me, man, I've always in my life, I've kind of made a deal with myself, or just the way I am. I'm always going to face the truth. Right? Now, I may not realize, in fact, quite a long time. There's long periods of my life where I don't realize what the truth is. I think I'm facing the truth, but I'm not, etc. Right? But the thing I've always been able to do is when the truth is starkly, plainly in front of my face, I don't reject it. I accept it no matter how painful it is. And that was the moment I could not pretend anymore that my narcissism and my grandiosity and my self-worship was working. It wasn't, right? And so it's why, in a lot of ways now, especially, I'm really thankful the movie tanked. Because if that movie had done 100 million in the box office, and I know dudes in Hollywood like this, I know that I'm friends with some of them, not close friends, but I never would have changed. I would have been that dude for the rest of my life. Because how the fuck could anyone have ever told me I was wrong about anything? Fuck you. I did a $100 million movie based on my life. For real. I would have had to have some other crisis, right? Something, it would have had to have come to a head. And I have seen people, man, who kind of had a lot of early success in a row. And then like, they just aren't willing, no matter what crisis, to face any truth anymore. Because they're okay, well, here's the, I'm going to go with this old evidence. I'm not the new one. And I've just always been willing to face, sometimes it's got to be really stark and really in my face. but I will. And so that was, I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than that, you know? So it was like, now, but from there, bro, it wasn't just like, oh, and then, you know, now here I am and everything's great. Oh, I mean, like that was in most ways, that was not the end of the journey. That was the beginning of my healing journey, started there when I was faced with overwhelming soul crushing truth. And then it was like, it's almost like one movie ended, a new one started, you know?
The way I've heard you describe it in previous podcasts is you were on the top of a mountain and now you had to climb down and go to a different mountain.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing for anybody to realize, that the life that they've been living and the actions that they've been taking is in a direction or climbing to a place that they don't even want to go.
Yeah. It's just not working. I mean, like.
So what could you offer to people who might be in the middle of climbing a journey right now that is not in the place or destination that they shouldn't end up being?
Man, I'm going to tell you, this is might sound weird. I don't offer advice to people. No, this is one of those lessons I've learned. I don't, because every time someone says you should, what they are really saying is I should. Right. And so I try to avoid advice, you should, whatever. I just tell people, here's what I've done, here's what I've seen, here's what worked for me. Right. But I will tell you, man, for me, I've never benefited from walking down the path of a dead end. You know, I may not know I don't just decide, hey, this is dead and I'm going to walk it anyway. I think every path I'm on, at least when I started, is a good path. But as soon as I realize it's a dead end, I don't care how far along I've gone down it. As soon as I realize it, right? I recognize it to myself. I stop and I turn around and go back. Like I've never once in my life benefited from, well, I'm just going to follow this dead end to the end, right? And then hope for the best. That just doesn't work, you know? So, I mean, like, it's sort of like it. But not everyone's like that, man. There are a lot of people who would rather die, and I mean that literally, than admit they're wrong. I mean, that's just a fact, and there's only millions and millions of examples of that, right? And so I'm not like that. I'd rather accept the painful truth now because it never gets less painful. You know? It doesn't. The longer you wait, the harder. It's like a debt, right? Debts don't get cheaper the longer you wait to pay them off. At least no debt I've ever heard of.
No, I remember being 21 years old and looking at my body in the mirror and being like, that is not what a 21-year-old man should look like.
Right.
And then it's another year until I actually do something about it. And so I guess, have you always been good at shortening the time of you noticing something?
No.
Okay.
I've had shit obvious to everyone else in my life but me that I ignored for years. But I ignored is the key.
Yeah.
That's so I've gotten much better at recognizing truth quicker, painful truths, right? I think that's just reps and experience, right? And yeah, there's ways to maybe, like, you know, you can bring on all the fucking lifestyle optimizers. I'm sure they can tell you 50 ways to recognize truth faster, whatever, man. I'm not one of those. I'm friends with a lot of those dudes and I like them, but I'm not one of those guys. Like for me, it's much more, I'll tell you what I've really spent, especially the last 4 or 5 years doing, is connecting mind, soul, gut, whatever you want to call it, right? Putting it all together, learning to listen to my gut, my intuition, my higher self, whatever you want to call it. Because in my experience, that part of me is almost never wrong. Like, I can't really think of a time it's been wrong. Not counting future stuff, just like, you know, don't talk to this girl, or don't partner with this guy, or don't drive down that street. Like that stuff, when I listen to that, it pretty much always goes well.
Yeah, I've heard you say before about teaching your kids a lesson, and what you would teach them is that how important it is to feel what you're feeling.
Yes.
And and actually let it pass through.
Yes.
And actually what you, because in our world, we're living in such a world that is so thinking dominant.
Yes.
And so intellectual. And
Yes.
you succeeded in that world.
Yes.
And many people do, but
Yes.
it's not a feeling culture.
No.
And I've noticed actually that it's starting to become more.
Yes.
If you pay attention to the language that people use,
100%. Yes.
we are getting more into our bodies,
Yes.
which is a fascinating thing. And I'd love for you to
Mhm.
unpack why you think that is.
Yeah.
But like, why is feeling our emotions so important?
Well, because listen, this is not, I want to make very clear, this is not a thinking is good or bad and feelings good or bad. No. It's sort of like the metaphor I always use is like, if you want to know the area of a rectangle, it's length times width. And it doesn't make sense to say width is more important than length. What are you talking about? They neither exist without the other. I think in humans, thinking and feeling are both crucially, critically important, right? Like we do, the Western culture and American culture is heavily left-brained, reason, rationality, thinking dominant, like very, very much so. So almost everything, a huge number of the problems in our culture and mental health issues and all that can be traced back to some form of two word cell, right? Two reason dominant, to logic dominant, to thinking dominant, right? But at the same token, I don't know if you know people like this. I know people who are very right-brained and very spiritually and airy-fairy, and they're just like they're as far over there as some people are, like, you know, like being sort of thinking dominant, and they're like not connected to reality, and they're total messed up too. Like they're all kinds of fucked up, right?
You need both.
Yeah, right. You can totally be messed up in either direction, right? What I don't want to let go of any of my reason skills, logic skills, thinking skills. Those are all great. What I've been doing the last 4 or 5 years, especially, but really the last since 2009. That was when I had that moment. I really started my therapy journey. I think about 2011, 2012, right? And so like since then, so the last decade-ish, I've been trying to bring up sort of, if it's thinking here and feeling here, I'm just trying to bring the feeling up to where the thinking is, right? And to balance them, and not trying to bring the thinking down, bring the feeling up and get into my body and feel my emotions, feel my feelings, literally what am I feeling in my body? Not just what am I thinking in my brain, right? Like if I see someone and I'm like, oh, you know, she's really attractive, like I'm thinking about a girl, but I feel a horrible feeling in my gut. Okay, maybe I don't understand why I feel it, but that is a real thing, that feeling is, right? And it could be I could have eaten a taco that was bad, who knows? But like that's at least recognizing what I'm feeling. And then really connecting to those feelings and then integrating thinking and feeling. When I get to that spot, when my thoughts and my feelings are integrated, that's when I, by far, I'm in my best place in terms of making decisions, seeing the world, recognizing truth, admitting truth, all of that. That's when things are going right for me.
I noticed when I was doing research for this, that it was a situation where one of your children had fell down and your wife said, you're fine. Yeah. And you said, no, like, let the child feel what they're actually feeling. They're not just fine. Don't just brush it under the rug. Yeah. And to think how often we do that to ourselves.
Oh, dude, pay attention, man. If you're out and you see parents, right, and a kid falls down, pay attention to how many times, pay attention to what the parent says. Right? We'll just go with this example because it's a good one. If the parent says you're okay, like first off, the kid falls down and skins his knee. The kid's not okay. You know, they're not. Like in there, especially like a little kid. You're 4, you skin your knee. Your whole fucking world's ending. I mean, objectively, of course, it's not. But like, it really hurts, and you have all these feelings and emotions in your body going on that you don't understand, and the pain's overwhelming, and all this sort of stuff, and then you think about your dominant caregiver, like usually your mom, like the person who's the most, your sun and your moon, right? Tells you you're okay, but what you're feeling is everything but okay. That's super confusing and disconnecting, right? And the reason the mom is doing that is because the mom is trying to soothe herself and deal with her anxiety because her kid is bleeding and crying, right? And so she's telling herself he's going to be okay. But instead of just saying it to yourself and recognizing, oh shit, I'm super anxious because my kid is hurt, I need to take a deep breath. I can even tell myself he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. That's fine, right? If that's what you need. But you're telling the kid he's okay so that he will stop crying and then you don't have to feel anxious. That's bullshit. That's just flowing down the denial of emotions, pushing away of emotions, right? And of feelings. And I don't think feelings should be dominant, but that is making thinking dominant over feelings and cutting off who you are. Imagine if in society we're like, okay, we've got working legs, but no one gets to use them. You can only use your arms. Like, what the? I mean, I'm not trying to like put down people in wheelchairs, but pretty much everyone I know who's in a wheelchair is in it because they have to be, right? They have some injury or whatever. I don't know. They might exist. I don't know people who are voluntarily going around, but that's by cutting off your emotional stuff. That's like an equivalent of that. We're only going to use half of who we are. It's so obvious once you get into it, but when you're stuck in the matrix of the Western world, like most people don't even realize how, dude, man, like until I really started both psychedelic therapy and got on land and got space, I thought I understood this. I did not, man. I did not. It's like, only really now am I starting to really see how, and I had made immense progress feeling my emotions, connecting to them, and I still have so much further to go, but then also I just didn't realize how disconnected from myself I was. Like I really didn't. And like the last year and a half I've been on my ranch, and it's like, it's taken me about that time to just decompress and to like let go of the rush anxiety, shame-based culture that is the West and America especially. It's such a high pressure, high shame, high you're not good enough culture, right? And you don't even see it. It's it's everything in the water around us. I think you're totally right. A lot of younger people have woken up to this a lot earlier, right? Like you're the same age, or you're 20 years younger than me, and bro, the things you understand at 27, like if you were 27 and I met you when I was 27, I would like, what's wrong with this airy-fairy douchebag? Like, I'm like, what is he talking about? We might even get along, but I'd be like, what the fuck is this? I'm like, bro, you need to go hang out with the hippies. Like, totally. I would have been so utterly dismissive of what you were saying because it was like, what are you even talking about? Because I was so blind to all of it, right?
Yeah. So, like, why is that happening? Why are 27-year-olds waking up to these ideas? And why?
Because the old system doesn't work. The old system doesn't work, and enough people woke up before you were born, and talked about it enough, and then enough people older than you, like me, woke up enough where like, I'm not trying to take credit for anything you did or you felt, but where people like you are like, you were born into a matrix that was far more torn open than I was. Right. And so it was easier for you to see, hold on, like you had a lot of people in the social, influence sphere where you could look at, if you were that type of person and you were willing to kind of open your eyes and see, you had, I'm just going to make up a number. You had 100 people that you could look at who'd done that. I had maybe 10. Right. And so it's like, I think that is really why things are starting to open up a lot more, and more younger people are more awake because you have a lot more people you have a lot more opportunities to see other views. And so if you're open to those views, I think it's a lot easier. And then there's a lot more, like a dude like you 20 years ago would have been like really a lot of ways, honestly, an outcast, right?
I would have been a lawyer 20 years ago.
Oh, probably.
You know, like,
but no, I'm saying if
Yeah.
you were you exactly at 27,
Yeah.
transported back to when I was 27 at a bar, you would probably be a goofy outcast. Now you're like a well-known, well-respected dude, right? So like being awake and seeing this stuff and talking about it, it's not like mainstream, but it definitely has a much broader space where it's accepted and even celebrated, right? Whereas like life would have been like I'll give you a really good example. The guy who kind of introduced me to psychedelic medicine, he's this well actually the woman who the first woman who sat for me, she's like in her 70s, and she like had done MDMA therapy like years ago, like decades ago, when she was training to be a psychotherapist or something like that. And then she's been sitting for people for like 30 years. And like, bro, for years, she was like a true pioneer, like someone living metaphorically on the frontier with no power, just like some, like some Alaskan homesteader in terms of socially, right? Because if you're doing MDMA therapy in 1993, like who the fuck, where are you, dude? You're beyond the fringe of society, dude. The fringe of society means you can like go to the store. You're weeks from the fringe, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny talking to her now, man, because she's like, when I was doing this, in a lot of ways, man, those people have a resoluteness and a courage, but also a stubbornness, right? Because they're like, we're going to do the right thing. I don't give a fuck, right? Whereas now, like, and then, so like when I was your age, this was kind of on the fringe, but then it was the fringe. Like it was the fringe. It wasn't pioneers anymore, but it was fringe. And now and then like, when I started really 5 years ago, then it was like kind of the inner fringe, right? And now feeling and medicine, like psychedelic medicine, all this stuff it's not mainstream, but it's definitely, it doesn't have to be hidden anymore. You're not a lunatic pioneer anymore, right? And so I think that's, and also there's a lot of truth to that path. And so someone like you who wants to walk the right path, to grow, to see truth, is like you have a ton of opportunities to find it now that didn't exist, and you don't have to pay a heavy social cost anymore. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's why it's more popular.
How have you become so good at spotting where the world is going?
Because I don't try and spot where the world is going. I just watch where I go.
You've described yourself as a late early adopter.
Yes, I am.
To many different things.
It's
Austin.
Every single thing I get into ends up becoming mainstream. I don't see all the big, like I'm still not on TikTok, right? There's tons of trends I miss. I have never once gotten super into something that didn't eventually get big.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think it's just because it goes back to the truth thing. Like most people base their reality and their actions on what they see their friends doing or what they think is socially acceptable. Some of us don't give a fuck about that. Like it was, okay, remember I was talking about my parents, how they basically neglected and abandoned me as a kid. Okay, so that sucked in a lot of ways, and there was a lot of downside to that, but there is some upside. The upside is that I realized when I was like 3 years old, the adults were not coming to save me. And so like, I know a lot of people whose parents mixed a lot of love in with their abuse. And those people in a lot of ways had it worse than I did. Like I think the abuse on some sort of, if you could put it on a scale, I suffered a lot more of emotional, relational abuse than they did. But it's like I suffered so much that in certain ways I came out the other side. Like I don't care what my parents think. I know most adults are fucking idiots and losers and don't know what the hell they're doing. And none of them are coming to save me, right? And so like I don't base my decisions on what my friends are doing or what other people are doing. I actually evaluate things myself. you know, and I look at things myself and I do things myself. And my primary relationship to truth or my primary orientation to truth comes from my own experience, which is so foreign to most people, dude. Like, oh God, I know someone right now. I'm just dealing with this woman, and literally, man, she has no relationship to reality outside of what her friends think. It's fucking, it took me a long time to actually understand how she thinks, because it's so foreign to me to base what I mean, yeah, of course, like if all my friends tell me to go eat at a restaurant, yeah, okay, like that's going to influence me. I'll go eat. I'm not pretending I'm some island that nothing anyone else says has any impact. That's nonsense. But like, even if everyone loves some restaurant, if I go visit and it's not good, I'm like, no, it's not good. Like I'm going to tell you guys, it sucks. It's not good. For years, every friend I had was on Snapchat. I'm like, fuck Snapchat. It sucks. I'm not going to be on it. I was right. But with TikTok, I might be wrong. It looks like, I don't know. TikTok, we'll see. It looks like it's on a different trajectory than Snapchat. We'll see though, right? Okay. So, I always evaluate it myself. I always think for myself. Whereas like this woman, like I have to learn how to I had to learn how to have a conversation with her, because I had to realize like she literally cannot conceive of what it means to evaluate a fact or an experience based only on what she thinks. Like I have to just talk about what other people think. That's the only way she can form an opinion. It's on one hand, it's very sad. Like I feel bad for her, because like fuck man, and she doesn't realize it at all. Like she can't either or won't realize it. On the other hand, it's so fucking frustrating. I want to strangle her. Like, what is wrong with you?
Why are people like that?
Oh man, if you really want the full answer to that, you should bring in a really good like psychiatrist or psychotherapist to explain the dynamics of that. Basically, I'm not going to speak to like her specific situation, but I can just say basically someone who had an extremely narcissistic, controlling parent. Think of like a cult leader, right? If you had a cult leader or someone who acts just like a cult leader as a parent, what they do is tell you that your reality comes from them. What I say is reality, right? And so there's two essential ways to react to that. You can become the rebel and it's fuck you, and then you're the extreme, I don't believe anything anyone says, which like I know a lot of investigative reporters like that, like the really good ones don't believe anything anyone says because they had horrible controlling parents who basically tried to brainwash them, right? The other way to deal with that is to go fully into to fully accept and adopt that worldview. And so then you just replace your parents with someone else. Like my reality comes through someone else. What they think is true is what I think is true. It's not conscious. There's no set of words you could use to convince this woman that that's actually the case for her. She doesn't see it.
But you see it. It's so clear.
I mean, it's clear, bro. It's clear. This is not.
You said before that no man to me is more of a hero than he is to his children.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a wise thing to say. And I like to say people should judge me by how the people closest to me think of me.
Yeah.
How do you think about raising children? And how do you think about making that a true statement?
Man, that's such a deep question. There's so much that goes into how raising kids. I can sum it up pretty quickly though. My most important job as a father is to ensure my children feel, not just know, but feel unconditionally loved by me and their mom. Right? Like if we do that, then we can almost mail in the rest or screw up the rest and we're probably going to be okay. Like that's the most important thing. That's the most important thing. Like 80, 90+%. Like I know so many people who had parents that really nailed that. And in every other way, they were kind of shitty parents and they still had great childhood and they turned out great and everything, So like, that's what, you meet people who are like, I was poor and I didn't know it. And because their parents made sure they felt unconditional. They knew and felt the unconditional love from them. That's why. And my wife, I think, does a really good job with that. She's very good at that. I'm not as good as she is.
What are examples of your wife doing it well?
Man, okay. so the way, especially as a mom, you do that, it's not telling your kids you love them. I mean, that's important, but that's like 5% of it, honestly. What it is being physically and emotionally connected to them and attuned to them, right? Especially as babies, man. Like, man, I'm not sure about this, but the pretty solid research on this looks like you got about 3 years as a parent to make sure that your kid's attachment style is a loving, connected one. And if you don't, I'm not saying they're gonna be murderers or something, but like they're gonna have issues. Like they're like shit's fucked up, and like they're got the hard stuff ahead, right? Which I don't know what the percentage is, but I would bet you it's less than 10% of people who were raised with a loving attachment style.
Wow,
truly. Like I that's just my gut feeling. It could be more, but like I don't know. I don't think it's not much more if it's more 20-25% max. There's no way it's 25%. No way. Like you just tell dealing with people like these people didn't. 1 out of every 4 people did not have super loving, connected parents. No way. But like so, and what that looks like is being attuned to their needs means when a kid's crying, especially 3 and under, they're crying because they don't have a need being met. So it's comforting them, and then you need to understand what their need is, and then help them understand what their need is, right? Because they often don't know, like babies they don't know they're hungry. They're just in pain, and so they cry. And she was the one who's like, listen, Tucker, babies cry because they're tired, they're hungry, or they're in pain. I mean, like they pooped and it's burning their butt or whatever. That's it, to a certain until they start kind of understanding their world and learning to manipulate, and then things can change a little, right? And they can cry for attention or other things, but like or cold or hot, which is pain, right? But like she's really attuned to them. She's really connected with them. I have 4 kids. All of them were really happy babies. They were all, even we have one who like, I think just has an angry temperament, but she's like, for someone with an angry temperament, she's pretty happy, And so like she just did such a good job connecting with them. You can tell they all feel very secure in themselves, right? Like because their primary relationship with their mom was a secure one, right? There was not a ton of anxiety. There was not a ton of chaos. There was not a ton of ambiguity. When they cry, they knew their mom was coming, and she came every time, right? And so like, and you can just tell the way they relate to the world, that they came from that, and like, once I understood that and learned that, now I can look at kids and you can tell really quickly, like not even who's a good or bad parent, because that's a different thing. I just mean like who practiced a secure attachment style and who did not, right? And like it's glaringly obvious. So that's especially from a mom. That's what I mean by unconditional love. And dads can get like, listen, you can hold your kid and all that. But man, I'm just gonna tell you, like, look, I know some dudes who like, the first time I ever felt love was when I saw my baby and all. And I don't doubt that. I don't shit on those dudes. If that's what they are, then that's cool. I was not like that, right? Like for me, love comes. Granted, I had a very different, parent than my wife. She had a different parent. Her mom had her issues, but was far more connected than my mom ever was. And so like for me, a love comes from a relationship, right? Now granted, like your relationship with your children is never reciprocal, right? It's not at all. Like that is a very unique, even father child, mother child, they're a little different, but they're similar in that these are unreciprocal relationships by their nature. And if you don't understand that going in, and you aren't cool with that going in, you probably shouldn't have kids. Because I see so many people who are like so resentful of their kids, like, and I'm like, what the fuck did you think kids were gonna do? Show up and like put on a fucking butler outfit and start serving you? Like, what's wrong with you?
Well, I think it's because a lot of people look for children the same way they look for a partner, in the sense of they seek the love from
Yes.
having the baby or
They want
having
the-
the partner.
They
No,
want the
you
kid
need
to meet their needs.
You need to come at it from a place of like, nah, I'm good. And so that you can give them all you have to a partner
Exactly.
and to a child, I assume.
Yes, 100%. Now, don't get me wrong. Having children is extremely rewarding in certain areas, but it's also very difficult and very trying. Like, if I'm not going to act like, oh, I realized that it was a unreciprocal relationship and so everything was fine. No, dude, that was hard. It's hard to deal with. It's difficult. So I'm not pretending that's easy. But like, know that going in and accept that going in, right? Like I accepted, I knew, I'm like, okay, like if I'm lucky and we're both great parents, then our kids will start to give back to us maybe when they're way older and later, right? Or maybe not. Like I'm not looking at this like a 401k that I get to cash out in 20 years. Like that's bullshit, right? That's not how it works. But anyway, so the attachment style and like, I grew to love my kids as I developed a relationship with. I mean, I loved them, of course, when they showed up, but like really from the core love was based on our interactions. So for me, it's a relationship love is. My wife could not have loved those babies anymore from the moment they slid out of her vagina. Like she just like, but it's fine. And her mother too, who's an amazing grandmother, my mother-in-law, she's like same way, and that's cool. I don't doubt that. I don't like whatever, but it's just not my style. But like it obviously helps skin to skin contact, loving, holding them, I can help the baby understand its needs and meet its needs as well with some things. I'm not breastfeeding it. Like we do all breastfeeding. So I don't bottle feed her. So there's not a lot of feeding, at least when they're young. Now, my youngest is like 14 months. And so she's like she's interacting. So I can interact with her a bunch. And there's a huge developmental period where the father can be very influencing, right? And she's in that phase now. But the mother is still the primary influence. Like she's the one who grows the thing in her. Right? So like, let's not pretend this is the same. It's not. So, but like, you tell your kids, it's funny, like my wife and I did the 5 love languages. That's actually that test. There's a test you can take online. The book's like whatever. The test is actually really good because it kind of tells you what your love languages are.
How do you find the test?
Like
just Google
the 5 love languages. Like if only there was this way to find information on the internet, right? Like if only
I didn't know if there was a specific one that was
no. It's just like it's like one of the book sold 30 million copies. It's a super famous book, and they have this online quiz. And like I just sold my company Scribe. When I sold it, we had something like 500 employees, including part time and everything, and we had all these, you get Colby and all these different personality tests to help you understand people and manage them properly. I'm telling you, 5 love languages was the best.
Wow.
It is, because it really helps you understand what people care about. So like, for example, my wife and I share our top 2, which are, her 1 and 2 are my 2 and 3, which are time and touch, right? Very important to both of us. But weirdly, that's 1 and 2 for her. Number 1 for me is acts of service.
I could have told you that.
Yeah. And you know what's like last and like by far is words of encouragement. Whereas that's actually 3rd for her, because I learned early on that words don't mean shit. My parents said, I love you all the time. They didn't fucking mean one bit of it. Not one bit. Right. And so like, my parenting style, the way I try to be, is, of course I tell them I love them, right? Like it's not like, but I want them to feel I love them, to know I love them because of what I do, right? Not just what I say. And I say it too, though. It's not one or the other, right? And I have to be different because like my second, my daughter, Vaughn, she's very different than my 2 sons, right? Which bookend her. It's a boy, girl. She's very different. And so like the way I have to interact with her to reach her and help her understand stuff is very different than with Bishy or with, my 2 sons. Like my 2 sons are pretty similar. Like they love roughhousing and play, and they don't need a whole lot of telling them I love them. Some is good, but like they feel it, right? she's very, talking to her is different. It works really well. Like, it's like, but she's not a verbal person. It's the strangest thing. She listens a lot, but she doesn't talk back that much. So it was very confusing to me because you don't really, she talks, of course, but you don't like have long extended conversations with her. But like a couple times I would have very deep conversations with her where I would just kind of tell her what I thought. And then it's like years later, she's still repeating them back to me.
Wow.
And it's like, oh, I see. Okay. I get who she is. So like, a big part of showing them you love them is understanding them, right? Because they're not all the same. They're different. They each come out with their own personality, their own. Oh, and anyone who's like blank slate stuff is an idiot who's never had kids. You just stop it. That's stupidest shit ever. Like my oldest son is very similar to me. My oldest daughter very similar to my wife, although different in a couple of key ways. But our third and fourth are like, I don't know where those fucking kids came from. They're like, it's funny too, because my oldest two have blonde hair, blue eyes. They look like me and my wife. Youngest two are like green eyes, red hair. And I'm like close to doing DNA tests. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Like they look like aliens, like compared to the family. And they're like a little unit, those two. Those two are like, I don't know, they're great, but they're very different than their brother and sister. There's some similarities, but like, the third boy is he's like came out like Buddha, man. He's just like the calmest kid, unflappable, like, except for, a few kid eruptions about, he's hungry or hadn't slept. And that's just, even the Buddha's fussing then. But like, man, like a whole different kid, and then our youngest, this girl is like, she's unlike anything I've ever seen in a child, right? Not like, oh, she's so brilliant or whatever. I mean, yeah, she's smart, but it's more like her emotional orientation and how she relates to people and stuff is very unusual and very different. And so I've had to learn how to show up for each kid the way that's best for them, not the way I want to or what's best for me. Like I don't deal with Deacon the way I deal with Bishop. They're very different. And it doesn't work, Yeah. So that like and there's a ton of little things like, when the kid falls down, I say, are you okay? Not you're okay. Right. I have a million things like that, how we talk to them, because it is on a biological level, to some extent, you are programming your children from birth until about 7 or 8. Whether you want to or not. It's like, oh, I'm going to let my kids be who they are. You stop that. Like, we're very much of, like we have a rule in the house. If it's legal and safe, then the kids get to choose it, So like they want to dress like an idiot going to school. That's cool. No problem. It's legal and safe. Right. Like, so giving your kids a ton of freedom within some constraints is a great thing. Pretending like you don't have a huge amount of influence on them is nonsense. It's just not true. Right. And they're not computers you fully program. Right. Of course. I don't mean that, but they're also, not like set in stone either, right? Even though they come out with their own personality, it's a very weird dynamic. It's like a paradox. Like they definitely come out with their own. But we have home births for all 4 of ours, right? Midwives and everything, and I can tell you who our kids are based on like their births. Like in
what way?
You can see. Looking backwards, like each of our kids, the way they came out was very similar to who they've become.
Wow.
It's almost like their personality was already there. And most of the data and most of the research shows that temperament is almost totally, if not totally, inherited. It's not a temperament meaning like, was it mad, glad, sad? I forget what the four main temperaments are, but like they were there. They were already there. Like Deacon, the third one, the calm one, bro, he slid out. The midwife gave him like a tap on the back. He had one little cry, and I'm telling you, man, I was there. Like I'm not like this is all my wife told me. I was there in the pool. He like turned and looked at her, and like kind of stared at her, and was like, he was so calm, like. Almost like, hey guys, dude, it was crazy. It was nuts. Like it didn't even I remember even in the moment thinking, what is going on?
Really?
This is not a normal thing.
Did you have a conversation with your wife after that? Like,
Oh yeah, of course.
What just happened?
Oh yeah,
And,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Did you expect that? That wasn't the same as the other.
No,
Like,
of course not. No. The first one came out first and last came out like kind of quote normal babies crying and whatever. Second one kind of did that a little, but she had some other sort of things going on. Third one came out like an adult. It was the weirdest thing. Like came up from like scuba diving. It's like, oh yeah, how you guys doing? Like staring at her, looking right at her, which like doesn't, in a lot of ways doesn't make sense because babies don't really have their visual stuff isn't developed for months in a lot of ways. Like they don't even see an external reality for a few months. I don't know, man. I can't explain it. So, anyway, the way my approach to parenting is understanding where we are programming them, being as conscious as possible about that with our language, not having shame-based language. I don't say you have to, you should, you've got to. Well, like what I do is I tell them, okay, here's the choices in front of you, and here are the consequences of those choices. Right? Again, within bounds of safety. Like I'm like, well, if you go run in the highway, you could die. No, I'm not letting them run on the highway. Right? Like, come on, be serious. Yeah. But within like safe and legal, here's your options, here's your consequences, right? Again, to show them, I'm trying to teach them that they are sovereign, right? Because I can't just say you're sovereign and then treat them like a fucking slave or like treat them like an idiot or a dog or something, right? They're gonna be sovereign and they're gonna understand that because from an early age they have learned that they have choices. And every choice has consequences, and they're responsible for those choices, right? That's what sovereignty is, right? That's most people like to say freedom. Freedom in a lot of ways is a childish notion. Sovereignty is the adult notion, right? It's like, yeah, I want to do whatever the hell I want, but guess what? I got to deal with the consequences of what I do, right? Good, bad, whatever. Right? Those are, and so and I don't really have long conversations with them about sovereignty. They're not really at that age yet.
How old is the oldest one? Right?
8. Yeah, he's getting to that period now. And he's starting to ask like the serious question: why do people do this? Why this? Why that? And I give him like pretty adult answer. I mean, I try to meet him where he is, but I don't make up. A really good example. Like we've never once told our kids Santa Claus was real because Santa Claus isn't real, and we're not going to lie to them. We tell them, okay, why do people believe Santa Claus? Well, and we kind of explain why at a level they're going to understand. We say we still celebrate Christmas. We still do gifts. St. Nick was a real person. Here's what he did. You know, he gave to the poor in his community, did all these other things, and he was like a really good dude in a lot of ways. And so the Christmas in certain ways is a celebration of that. And so we're definitely going to celebrate. You get presents. And then we talk about, well, their friends believe Santa. And we're like, okay, it's not your job to tell them the truth. Like what they want to believe is up to them and their parents, right? So we have those conversations and they get that, you know? And so they get to kind of experience all of it, but that's one of my major things. I refuse to lie to my kids, right? Which doesn't mean I tell them the whole truth all the time. That doesn't make sense. Like, I tell them the appropriate truth for their age that I think they can handle, right? But I never, ever, ever lie. And I tell them, mommy and daddy will never tell you a lie. And when there's things, I'm like, well, there's more to this. I can't really tell you, or I'm not going to tell you right now. This is what I can tell you.
How are you going to treat the books and them reading your writing? Because,
bro, we've already been through this.
Yeah.
No, this is already. So one time, I'll tell you the story. Did you see this on my site, Poopy Daddy? Oh, so this will be new to you. Okay. So this was about a year and a half ago. It was because right before we moved on the ranch. So my daughter, she was 4.5-ish at the time, or 5 maybe. She like had a, you know, she was potty trained at that point, but she was, you know, not quite out of the accident phase. And so, and her especially, man, when she gets focused on something and playing, she totally ignores her body and will just piss and shit herself, right? And like not in a bad way. It's just she's so excited about her dolls or whatever that like, and like I can't even be upset about that because her mom and dad, you know, in certain ways are still like that. And so she was out doing something, whatever, and she shit her pants. And she was like really embarrassed and mortified. So she was at the age where she kind of understood this is what babies do. And so she was mortified about it. And so my wife, I wasn't there. My wife trying to like help her get through it and realize it's not a big deal, said, oh honey, I know it, like you're upset and all that. Like, how do you feel? Went through the whole thing. And she's like, I'll tell you something. Like, your daddy did this when he was an adult. He pooped in a hotel lobby. And like, so it's like, this happens. She was really thinking about what she was saying, right? And so like Bishop was there too. And he's like, wait, what? Daddy pooped in a hotel lobby for real life? And so so then she realized, oh fuck, I can't lie about this now, right? Which is fine. Like, and so she kind of like just told them enough about, she was trying to just tell them enough about the story, but they were the idea that daddy shit his pants in a hotel, they weren't letting this go, man. And so they were just like, so she actually had to show them the scene in the movie, like, because they can't read, right? And she didn't want to read them the story. So like they saw and they laughed, bro, and then they made up a whole song about it called Poopy Daddy. And I actually recorded them singing the song. Daddy pooped in a lobby or whatever. Like you go to tuckermax.com, you can look. Poopy Daddy's is one of the stories on there, and I have a video of my daughter singing that song. And still to this day, oh dude, it's like a major part of our family that daddy pooped in it ended up being really good because I think that was the moment they realized daddy's not perfect. Daddy, because I always tell them daddy makes mistakes, but like it's a different thing when your dad tells you now. And they were, oh dude, and they still laugh about it. And someone will come over for dinner and like they'll come up and they'll be, my daddy pooped in a hotel lobby? And like a lot of people are like, yeah, how do you know that? Like, I didn't know that. And then like it's so, but bro, I mean, I'll let them read that. Like they know they know we have this expensive, nice ranch because daddy wrote. The way my son likes to say it is daddy wrote books about pooping in a lobby. Like, that's not what the fucking book's about, you shit. But yeah. So
but it's so funny because it's so much better that they hear that from you or your wife than it is a kid at school.
Yeah, of course.
I know you're creating your own school now, so obviously it's a different environment.
Right.
But it's an amazing thing to be able to tell the truth to your children, have them understand at their level at such a young age.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, it's cool too because it's not like it's not some secret. I'm not gonna lie to my kid, bro. Like, man, think about, okay, so when I was talking about like how we live in a traumatic, like fucked up culture, one of my favorite examples, and this really gets a lot of people get really upset by this, but one of my favorite examples is actually Santa Claus, right? Because think about this, man. Like, I'm not the first person to say this, but very few people talk about this. So as a father and a mother, as a parent, you are like literally the source of life for this kid, the protector of this kid. You are the sun and moon to this kid. And what you do is you tell them, if you don't do what I say and act good, shame-based language, act good, there's this old fat man way far away who's watching you all the time and knows everything you do. And if you don't do what I say, if you don't obey me, he's not going to give you gifts. But if you do, if you're a good kid by the way I define it in other people, then this dude breaks into our house and leaves stuff for you. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on how fucked up that there's so many levels of fucked up that like someone's watching you all the time, that you're being judged all the time by someone else's criteria, that the things you need to value the most are external, that the reason to be good is external. I mean, like, I could keep going, dude. This is so fucked up. Like, so fucked. It's one of those fairy tales or myths that, like, if you heard from another culture, you'd be like, what? This is barbaric. Who are these primitive savages? This is so celebrating a holiday and giving gifts, and that's great. The way the Santa Claus mythos, and then the thing is, it's a lie. And you tell them, you pretend it's real. And then they figure out sometime between 6 and 10 or 12, like, God forbid, literally every kid's like, of course this has to be true. My parents told me it's true. We got gifts. And then you realize, my God, what else is a lie? Like, they're all lying to us all the time. Like, it's actually a great metaphor for the matrix that we live in, the society, because it is. Like, that is almost everything that people think is true is, in its own way, a Santa Claus myth. But, like, what the fuck, dude? What the fuck? Like, that was one of those things where I knew I married the right woman when I'm like, listen, we're not pretending Santa Claus is real. She goes, oh, of course not. That's horrible. I'm like, we're good. We're good.
How has your relationship or your opinion about God changed over the years? And where is it currently at?
Yeah, so I used to be not a devout atheist. I was just an atheist because it's like, I think at a certain level of intelligence and consciousness, if you're not atheist, you're actually stupid. Like, seriously, if you're looking at the world from a rationalist, reason-based, logical perspective, and you believe in God, you're stupid. You've been fooled. No, seriously, because there is no, people like, oh, Pascal's wager. Shut up. There is no way to get to God from reason. That is just a fact. We have only a few thousand years of philosophy, and very smart people thinking about this. If your argument for God is a reason-based argument, you're just wrong. Period. But here's the thing that most people, and look, and anyone who's actually educated in this space, this is like one of those dirty little secrets where anyone educated in this space will tell you this and know this, but like most people don't get it. Reason and logic are not a way to find truth. Period. They're not. Reason and logic are ways to find consistency within a system, right? Which are not the same thing. They can be the same thing in certain situations. Like if you have a mathematical system with certain assumptions, these are numbers, they represent these entities. Here, addition, multiplication, or here's the axioms. Now within that system, logic is the way you find truth within that system. Period. Correct, right? And some of those systems can be deeply ingrained in reality and can represent a lot of truth very accurately, right? So I'm not trying to say it's like people are like, oh, logic is a complete construction. No, that's bullshit too. That's not true. They are very effective at finding consistencies in systems or from certain assumptions, extrapolating what that means. What logic and reason are not good at is telling you everything that exists. Okay. Like, and I'm making, literally thousands of years of Western philosophical debate and argument very simplified, right? Okay, so we can go into Hegel and like all that shit if you really want, but it's really, you don't need to. So I started believing in God, truly believing. It was about 3.5 years ago. The first time I did, I had never done drugs before, any drugs. I drank, right, or whatever, and maybe ate a pot brownie once or something, but I'd never done any drugs at all until I started psychedelic medicine therapy for trauma, right? I have a huge long piece on that on my website if you want to read it. Like my first couple experiences with MDMA therapy, and then a long piece is kind of an intro to psychedelics for medicine for people who don't know that space. And so, because I've gotten to be something of an expert in the space, at least an expert of being a beginner, right? And so, anyway, the first time I did LSD, I've only ever done a therapy. Like, I don't know how people do LSD and go to concerts, man. The first time I did that shit, I just cried, I wept, shook with grief for 12 hours. Like, I don't know how you take that shit and go to concerts, man. That blows my mind. But the second time I took LSD, clear as day, I was like, oh, fuck. Oh, shit. Now I understand everything that Jesus was teaching and Buddha was teaching. Because I studied Jesus and Buddha in college, but, from a anthropological, philosophical, not from a... And I'm like, oh, shit. Okay. And I don't want to say I talked to God. I don't think I did. That's a different sort of experience. I think it was much more of a deep, profound experience of God, right? Which is not the same thing. And I'll never forget, a couple days after that, I called up the same friend I was talking about, was Mormon earlier in the podcast. He's very Mormon. And I was like, dude, But he's also a really smart guy. Ben Hardy is his name. Like he's written a bunch of well-known books. He's a great dude. You'd love him for your podcast. But Who Not How and Future Self and a bunch of others. But he, I got off him and said, listen, let me ask you some religious stuff. So you believe in God not because like of the Bible or what you were taught. To you, God is an experience, right? Like you feel God. He's like, yeah, dude, I've been trying to tell you this for years. And I was like, bro, I swear to God, I thought you were stupid. I thought you'd just been fooled. I thought you were making this up in your head. Really, I did. Because I had never had the experience. So remember you asked me like how are you able to see things early? And I'm like, I just think for myself. I didn't believe in God because I had never had an experience of God. So how the fuck am I going to believe in it? It doesn't make any. And I'm still convinced that quite a few people who are religious have never had an experience of God and are just doing what they're told in a way and believing whatever. But not all of them are. And I don't know what percentage. I don't have any feel for that. But I know Ben's one of those people who's very smart but very religious, but like in a spiritual sense, even though he's part of the Mormon church and but you know, you meet people who are like, man, if every Christian was like this, I'd be Christian. He's one of those dudes, right? And where he just kind of glows with it. And he's like so moral and ethical and does the right thing. And he acts the way you would imagine Christ, like what Gandhi said, these Christians, how unlike Christ they are. So I'm not comparing Ben to Jesus Christ, but I'm saying he acts the way you think someone who followed Jesus Christ would act, right? And so that's when I was like, oh, it is an experience. I'm like, I finally had the experience. I get it now. Like, I'm not going to go be fucking Mormon. Like, I think all religious dogma is bullshit. Because I'll tell you, and I think Christ taught that. And I think that's why the Jews, especially, not the Romans, but the Jews killed him. The Romans killed him technically, but the Jews and the Pharisees pushed it forward, whatever. The kingdom of heaven is within. Is Jesus trying to, and you can go through, there's tons of other things he says. Is Jesus trying to explain that you don't need dogma and you don't need church? Those are fine if you want them, but that's a container for an experience. What you're here for is the experience of God, right? And that the kingdom of heaven within means it's all within you. Like, I am not a God, but I have part of God in me, and I can have the experience of God quite literally anytime I want. I just have to connect to it. And that was the first time I'd ever connected to it, right? And I was like, fuck. And Buddha in his own way taught the exact same thing. And I'm like, man, like that's profound. And so now I was talking to John Gordon about this. Do you know John? Yeah, okay. So like about this, he asked me, we had a conversation, like the first question, he's like, are you Christian? I'm like, bro, that's a complicated question. No, not in a dogmatic sense, and I don't belong to a church, but I would consider myself of a believer in and follower in the teachings of Christ and of Buddha and of several others, right? So like several other avatars, Rumi, you can go down the list, right? Anthony Mello, and I absolutely. It depends. Jordan Peterson's answer to this is the best. When people ask him, do you believe in God? He said, well, it depends what you mean by believe and by God, right? Like, there's no better answer for that than that question. And I totally agree with Jordan on that. I absolutely have had the experience of God. I believe that I believe in God in that spiritual sense. Although my notion of what I think God is and what's going on is very different than almost any religious people. But it has a lot of common ground with someone who's what I call spiritually Christian, like John Gordon is or Ben Hardy is, right? We are far more aligned than not, in terms of both how we show up in the world, what we really believe about Jesus and about God, and how it impacts our day-to-day life. We show up very, very similar.
So that was in a therapeutic context with some.
I was going in for therapy, but I got enlightenment.
So, okay. Yeah. So how do you take that into your day-to-day life when you're not on any medicine of any sort?
Oh man, that's a good question. And that's such a long answer. it goes back to what you're talking about, like intuition and connecting to yourself and listening. And I've gotten way better at kind of feeling my feelings, connecting to my intuition. And the way I take that experience, because that was a deep, profound connection to that part of me. And it's not easy for me. I've met people, I think, who live nearly in that state, not many, or very close to it. I'm not sure how, like, I don't think you can really live fully in that state in a day-to-day physical life, just because you're too ethereal and out there in a way, right? Like, it's hard to connect to physical reality when you're in that state. So, but I've definitely met people who seem to shine and glow and operate in a way that's like, man, that's amazing, like how they are. And you can almost feel their peace and serenity and contentment. And so, but for me, I've tried to emulate that. But the way you can emulate it behaviorally, but if it's not coming from inside, it's tough to do, right? I'm not even saying it's fake. It's just hard to do. And so what I generally do is I try and ask my body what it's feeling, ask my higher self what it thinks, listen to what comes up, if anything, right? It seems weird. Like, it's almost talking to myself, but it's kind of weird. And then I also try and understand, like, so my belief is that we are actually energetic beings having a physical experience. And so I try to remember that and interact as if this is all, game's not quite the right word, but this is all an experience that we're having and I'm having to evolve and improve and do better. And so that's why it's like, people are like, hey, it doesn't feel like no matter how hard I work or what I do, like there's always struggles. And it's like, well, yeah, that's why we're here. Right. And so, like, if the point's to get better, chilling ain't doing that, man. Like there's a time for resting and relaxing and chilling. Right. But like, a life of not even pure hedonism, just pure calm means no growth. Right. And so, okay. But that's not, I don't think that's why I'm here. And so I try and remember that, and as much as I'm possible, stay in the closest emotional state to that as I can get, which is, I've done really good at feeling my feelings and dealing with my trauma. That I'm like that part, feeling feelings and dealing with trauma, I'm maybe 80-90% of the way through. Let's call it living in the most enlightened state I can, man, I'm 10 or 20% of the way there for that, dude. That's not an easy thing for me.
Well, the self-awareness is there.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way you get better, right? Yeah. That's all improvement begins with truth. And so telling yourself the truth. So I got to look at myself and be like, all right, like, okay. So for me, I use anger a lot of times as a way to, it's a frontline emotional reaction for me in a lot of ways, right? And so, like, I got to be honest, like, how angry did I get today? How reactive was I? With my kids, with my wife, with whoever, that's important. So I gotta really focus on that, because, but that's that's what I'm talking about, where it's like, I see a lot of people that do like a lot of psychedelics, like ayahuasca, especially for some reason, and they'll go like 50 times and they think they're all enlightened, but they're still the same person, right? Because it is not the same thing to like have the experience of God versus change your patterns. Just because you have the experience of God doesn't mean you have done the work to change your day-to-day patterns. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know people who, they feel like they've reached an enlightened state on like 5-MeO DMT or even during yoga or something. I believe them. Like, I'm not, maybe they could be telling the truth, and maybe they are. And let's say they are. If you show up back in your physical, regular existence with dysfunctional, broken, toxic patterns, it doesn't matter if you're hanging out, drinking beers with God on drugs, when you're like, because this is what you take, medicine, whatever. But like, like it's not.
The results that you're actually producing in your life is how you're showing up with or without God.
Yeah. I mean, it gets back to what you said, which is true, man. I can never be a bigger hero than I am in the eyes of my kids, man. You know, and like, if I didn't show up, that's first and foremost. Wife actually comes after that, right? I mean, like, our relationship is very important, but I don't need to be a hero to my wife. I need to be a partner to my wife. Those are different things. I don't want a partner who's I'm a hero to. That's a very imbalanced relationship, right? And a parent-child relationship is imbalanced by its nature, but there's a way it can be properly imbalanced, right? And so if I show up as a hero to them, if when they're my age, they're like, man, my mom and dad were just awesome. They were like, they're gonna have struggles in their life, but like, if their struggles didn't come from us, if instead what came from us was love and support and acceptance, then I've basically done the right thing about all of this. Because in fact, I guess it is possible to really show up that way great as a parent and fuck everything else up in my life. That is, I guess, possible. But like, for me, it'd be pretty tough to fuck up the rest of my life and still show up amazing as a parent, just because the things for me are very aligned, you know? Yeah. Like, the things holding me back as a parent are the same as things holding me back in life, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful for you coming here, because it's seemingly a lack of male role models in the world who also want to show up for their children. Maybe because when you start to go down the media route, it is like,
it sucks you in, dude.
It sucks you in.
It does.
And the thing is,
I've already been through that though. I'm immune to it now.
Exactly.
It has no allure to me anymore.
Exactly. But you see a bunch of their business heroes.
I know those dudes. I know who you're talking about.
And
I mean, like,
and
at least in general.
Yeah, and there's nothing against that, but I notice it more and more, and I find myself having an inclination to tell the stories of the people who are raising families and children, because not enough young men in the world are looking at being a family man as something to aspire to.
Well, they don't understand that the most rewarding thing you're going to do in your life as a dude, I shouldn't say that. The most rewarding thing I've done in my life as a man, and I have been super famous. I have made millions and millions of dollars. I have slept with more women than I can literally count. I've drank everything there's to drink on earth. I've had whatever cool experience you want, right? I've had it. And I'm just like, right now, I have all the money and power and prestige to do anything I want. And what I want to do is spend my time on my ranch with my kids and my wife. You know, everyone says I love my wife and kids. I actually like my wife and kids. Like, I like being around them. It's really enjoyable and fun. And I want to be a father, a husband, a provider, a protector. I really like all that. A teacher, for them. Like, it's really, really rewarding. Now, I will tell you, man, if I had done it at your age, I would have fucked it up. I was not ready, right? Now, I'm just saying me. Like, you're a different dude than I was, right? At that age. But, like, I'm really glad I waited. And as a dude, you can wait. You can really just get better with age up to a certain point as a man. Women, it's a different game, like, whole different game. But for us, like, the cool thing, one of the benefits, most guys think it sucks being a guy, because when you're in your early to mid 20s, it really does suck. Really, man, because like, you have your lowest mate value, lowest money, lowest mate value in a lot of ways. Like, you're young, but like, no one gives a fuck about you, right?
It's like being a freshman in college.
Right. Yeah, seriously. It really is. Except in college is a weird contained environment. I know so many dudes who did really well in college and they got in the real world and they crumbled because they're like, this sucks. Like, I don't understand. I had girls in college, like, things were great, and they don't realize you're basically a freshman again, except you're not competing against the whole world now instead of just the dudes at your college. And it's way harder. Right. And all the hot girls have now been sucked up by rich old dudes, and not even old, like 29 or whatever. Right. Like, so that's it. But they don't realize that, okay, if you start working your ass off at 22, by the time you're 28 or 30 or 32 or even 38, whatever, like, I met my wife when I was 38. If you do shit right, you can be in an amazing position. And then that 24, 25, 26-year-old girl comes right out of college. Now she wants to marry you. Right. Which is honestly better, because, I mean, look, man, women mature much faster than men, and women have whole different biological cycles than men. And so for almost all dudes, not all, but almost all, you're way better off marrying a woman who's at least a little bit younger, 2-3 years at least, if not a lot younger, because she's going to be at about your level, right? Like it is not unheard of. There are plenty of great marriages where the people are the same age or whatever, right? So, but for most guys, for me, man, my wife is 10 years younger than me, and she's like really smart and mature for her age. And I'm, not that mature for my age, right? So we're like a perfect match, right? Like if I was regular, then 5-6 years difference would be better. And if she was regular, the same, but she's very mature for her age and I'm immature for my age. So 10 years is a good match for us, right? 10 years apart. We're very, very on par, right? Because she's also very smart too. And like what, but for most guys, you're better off. You're going to be in a better position when you're 28 to marry a badass 24-year-old than you are at 24. And you're going to be even better at 30 and better at 32. Like you're getting more mature, you're getting wiser, you're getting more responsible. And so like there comes a limit to that, right? Like you don't just go on forever. But there's a period, a lot of guys don't realize like it's going to get better, but you've got to make it better. Right. And if you do, and you don't have to, bro, you don't have to be a fucking rock star. I can't tell you how many guys now, I'm like, you realize you can go make 120 grand a year as a HVAC, or you can make 80 grand a year to start as an HVAC technician. And you can have your own business in 4 years, making 150 a year and work very easy hours. And now you're like, and you can do all fun, work out, be smart, read all the shit you want. You be a total fucking badass. And so by the time you're 28 or 30, you've got your own house, you've got your own business. You're going to have your pick of 24-year-old girls, like girls 2 years out of college who realize, oh, okay, like I want to find a great dude and marry. You're the 30-year-old that they want to marry. You're not that dude at 22. You can't be at 22 because you're a fucking idiot and you have no resources, you have no experience, you have no wisdom. And and it's okay. I mean, you could be a badass for a 22-year-old. I mean, those dudes exist, but like, it's okay to take time to build up to be who you are. And you still get to sleep with girls and have relationships in between. It's not like you have to be a monk, but a lot of dudes don't. They get so depressed. Like, everything's horrible. No, it's not, man.
Just in this moment. And it's not even that bad. You just need to put in some work. So
exactly.
That's very wise advice from you. And I like to end these podcasts asking the guest of a challenge to leave the audience with something. I know you don't give advice,
right?
But is there a challenge you could give people with because they listen, they learn?
Do you have an average listener, an avatar listener, or is it all over the map or what?
It's all over the map.
All right. Well, I'll tie it into something we talked about. So if someone was up for a challenge and they wanted me to give them a challenge, the challenge would be find what are the 3 areas in your life where you're lying to yourself the most. What are those? Find those. Whatever you want to do with them, do with them. Go find the 3 areas, because there's probably more. The 3 areas where you're lying to yourself the most.
What's the area you're lying to yourself the most?
Yeah, right.
Now?
That's the obvious question. It was already in my head. There's probably 2. I'm not sure which one is the most. So I'll tell you 2. It's one that we just talked about. Like, I think I'm, especially probably all my kids, but especially my oldest son. I still think I'm too hard on them, and I tell myself I'm not. I'm not like super hard on it, but like compared to what I could be, I still think I'm probably not being fully honest with myself about how many outbursts I have, because like still, although, I didn't yell, but what I think is yelling and what they think is yelling are not the same thing. So, it the hard truth, the really painful truth is probably for me right now, the most healthy interaction I can have with my kids is one where I'm totally fucking calm. Now, I can say all the same shit, right? It's not about holding boundaries, right? It's like, I have no problem holding boundaries with them. It's more like how I'm delivering the message. I think the messages are all correct. I don't think I might not be, if there's a place that I'm not being fully honest with myself, it's like how many times I have more harshness than I intend or want in the message. And the best correction, honestly, for me, and I've gotten way better at this, but I'm not 100% on it, and I can be 100% if I really focus on it, is to deliver every message for them, even hard ones, in a totally calm, even keel voice, like the way I'm talking now. Like, this should be the tone and the delivery. And even if it's probably 80% now, I'm telling myself in my head, it's oh yeah, no, it's barely any 20% harshness from a parent is too much. It's too much. Like, I get to make mistakes. If I yell once a month or something, it's fine. But like, it's too much. That's one. And the other one is, I'm kind of like on a, whatever you want to call it, a mini retirement right now, or a break. Like, I don't have a business. I don't have whatever. And I think there's a lot, like, I've been wondering sort of what's next, and like, oh, I don't know, and this and that. I think I actually know. I think in fact, I know. And it's like one of those things where it's like, I kind of don't want it to be that, because it's going to be hard. It's going to be, at least for me, it's going to be challenging for me. And it's like, well, can't it be this other thing
That's easier.
I know they're both hard. It's just one's like harder in a way that's easier for me to deal with. Right. And so, I mean, really honest with myself, then that's the one. That's really the one. Even more than the kid one, man. The kid one's true, but like, that's gonna be an easy, quick fix. Like, I just have to focus on it, and then it's the harder one is like, I know what's next, and I'm not doing it.
Well, I appreciate you putting it out there, saying it out loud. That's the hardest part.
It is.
And
it is.
I'm really grateful for you, your time, your attention, your wisdom. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. Yep.